Bill. Thanks, Dahina. Joining us this morning, we've got Nick Chisnell, Service Manager of the Integrated Learning Disabilities Team and Transition Service. Also joining us is Andy Ottaway-Searle, Merton's Head of Direct Provision, Angela Wardell, who is the Supported Living Service Manager, and Rochelle Simpson, who is the Merton Shared Lives Scheme Manager. So before we start the session, I'm going to very quickly run through some of the key things you need to know about our Zoom meeting this morning. So we're going to deliver the presentation part of today's session in its entirety, and that's going to be recorded. And we're going to take questions at the end. So the presentation is going to be recorded, and a link to the recording will be posted on Merton Mencap's online channel, Merton Mencap TV, so that people who couldn't attend today can watch it later. And if you want to revisit the session, you can watch the recording too once it's posted online. So whilst recording the presentation of the session this morning, we do ask people to turn off their cameras and audio so that the recording only captures the speaker talking and not everyone watching. So at the end of the presentation, we'll pause the recording and we'll open the floor to questions. We'll let you know when that's happening, and you'll hear a recorded message to say that the recording has stopped. And at that point, you can turn your cameras back on if you want to join in discussions and take part in the Q&A. You can also use the chat function during the presentation if a question occurs to you, so you don't forget it, and then we can pick it up during the Q&A. So if you wish to ask a question during the Q&A, you can ask it out loud, just to attract our attention by waving at us, or you can use the raised hand function on Zoom to let us know you have a question, or pop it in the chat. We always ask people to please try and keep their questions of a general nature that will be of interest to everyone, as we can't discuss people's own individual cases in any depth at these open meetings, I'm afraid, due to confidentiality. So during the session, Dahina and I do take note of any general issues that people are experiencing with statutory services to inform our forum representation work, the local authority in health. I just wanted to assure everyone that we don't share individuals' names with anyone or disclose identities, and we only take general themes to the meetings our reps attend. And outside of this meeting, you can tell us about any issues you're experiencing with statutory services by email or telephone, and we'd also love to hear about any positive experiences and things that are working well too. So that is all from me. So I'm now going to hand over to the first of our speakers for this morning's session, Nick Chisnell. Thanks, Nick.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nick Chisnell. I work for Merton Council. I'm a service manager. I cover the learning disabilities and transition service. Thank you for the invite. And I've been asked to initially talk about the housing options process for individuals and families. So starting off, what would happen, your son or daughter or person you're working with may be referred to either the transition service or the adults with learning disability team. A discussion would be held in relation to whether it's appropriate for your son or daughter or individual to receive the services of either a social worker, or in some cases in relation to health professionals, whether that's an occupational therapist, physiotherapist, psychology, speech and language therapy, behavioural support, and what have you. So in terms of housing, so essentially what happens, we have a weekly referral meeting. Each referral will be discussed along with multidisciplinary professionals, and we'd look at whether someone requires the right intervention from a social worker or other members of a multidisciplinary team, particularly with reference to the adults with learning disability team. If it's identified that someone has housing needs, then we would look at that and allocate a social worker or an assistant social worker. What they would do is they would do something called a Care Act assessment, or in some cases they would do a reassessment or review of an individual's needs. And that point, they would look at all options that are conducive to the individual and their families, and consider whether housing is appropriate or not. In terms of housing, so we have mainstream housing, and this is where people would need to register to get mainstream housing in terms of accommodation via flat, what have you. But some people, they may have eligible needs in relation to the Care Act, and they may wish to pursue accommodation outside of the parental home to support them to become more independent. So the social worker should, when they do their assessment, is work closely with you, work closely with the community, primarily look at, in a person-centered way, the individual's strengths, their assets, the things they like doing, the things they don't like doing, and work with the family about what options are available. In some cases, people may say, well, actually, I'm not quite ready to live on my own independently, fully independently, but I would like to try shared lives. I'm not going to talk about that because Rochelle will mention that later, or supported living. And Angela will talk about later supported living in terms of how that works. But essentially, what we're looking at is putting the individual in the middle, the most important person, looking at their likes, their dislikes, compatibility, and what would be the best option for them working with family to enable them to grow and develop independently. Some people might say, well, actually, I want to leave parental home. I want to get my own place eventually, but I will need a bit of help with that. So the kind of help we would put in is support, which enables people to become independent. So this support would not do things for people, but it's working with people to develop independent skills. So it might be that someone says, well, actually, I struggle to prepare and cook meals. I need a bit of support and guidance with that. Another person might say, well, I'm a bit anxious at night. What can we do about that? So it might be we say, well, let's look at assistive technology, tech solutions to lessen people's anxiety, support independence, but also people might need someone to stay overnight to support as well. So it's essentially what the social worker should be doing is working in advance, planning with families, friends, people involved with the individual, and looking at what's in their best interests and working about how we can get the right positive outcomes for people. So it might be we do use thinking ahead, and I'm sure you're all familiar with thinking ahead guidance. And I try to encourage social workers and people to use this because it helps and aids in planning in terms of looking at housing options. So there are times, sadly, that sometimes people are in a crisis situation and they need emergency housing options. So social workers and members of the LD and transition team, we would look at that closely, but sensitively with family to make sure we get the right options. But essentially what I expect from the team and the workers is the person is the most important person in the process, and we need to look at how we can enable people to develop and grow, equip independent skills, to help people to become more independent, but also give people real life opportunities in the community to grow and develop. Also, we want to make sure this is done safely and that we alleviate any anxiety concerns relatives may have, because it can be a daunting prospect for some people leaving parental home and going to either live on their own or in shared support with others. And it's making sure we have a clear plan and we regularly review what's going on, but it should be bespoke for the individual and their family. And I would expect workers within the LD and transition team to regularly touch base and communicate with you around the different options. What I do expect social workers to do is to think about innovative and creative ways to support independence, and looking at what connections people have in their local communities and build upon these to foster independence. So that's a snapshot overview of how it works. We do have something called the Learning Disabilities and Transitions Outcome Forum. These are separate forums where social workers do discuss different housing and supported living, in some cases residential care options for individuals. And what workers have to do is present the individuals, bring their strengths to the forum, but look at what are the best outcomes for people. So if somebody, if a social worker says, well, actually this person needs 2-to-1 access in the community, we want to explore what that means, what it looks like, and getting the best access in terms of community access and facilities, because we want to promote positive outcomes for people. I'm going to stop there because I appreciate there's quite a lot to get through in terms of other people's presentations. But if you've got any questions, I'm happy to take questions at the end. So please make a few notes and I'm happy to answer any queries or questions you may have after the end of these presentations. So thank you very much. Tracy, I'll move back to yourself now.
Yep.
Thank you.
Nina, are you happy to start sharing the slides now?
Hello. Angela's going to talk you through the slides, but I was just going to say a few words because I'm responsible for all the provider services. So just to say that I'm responsible for our in-house supported living service. There are other supported living services available across the borough and indeed residential. Nick was helpfully laying out there that, you know, obviously people leaving home, it is a big thing. And this is always best done in a planned way if possible. We know that doesn't always happen. But the one thing I would urge, and this is from personal experience as well, is that families do start thinking about the family member moving away from home as early as possible. Not that they have to leave home as early as possible, but that thinking is there. So it becomes a natural part of somebody's development. Before I hand over to Angela, just a couple of things to say. One is that many of you will know that we had 2 residential homes as part of our in-house provision, which have both closed in the past year. That's Riverside Drive and Meadowsweet Close. Decisions have been that decision had been mooted for some years and finally came to fruition last year. That's not a reflection on what we think about residential care. It was the thoughts are there is quite a lot of residential care available in the borough through our commission services, and residential care is absolutely appropriate for many people, but not for everyone. So the preferred model these days is to actually encourage people to go into supported living. And what Angela is going to show you, hopefully, I think, is that within supported living, there is a range of provisions. So we support people who are really quite independent to those who actually need quite a bit more support, and everything takes a wee bit longer with them. So I know that a concern of lots of families is supported living. Oh, it would be a step too far for my son or my daughter or my brother or whatever. But hopefully that, as Angela talks you through what we offer in-house and what is available in the other commission supported living service, is that it does cover, the term supported living actually covers a wide range of people's needs. And the other thing, just to say, as Nick was saying, there is a lot of thought and planning goes into this, and that continues once somebody has moved. So Angela's team will work closely with the learning disability team, that's the social workers, and as well as the therapists and anybody else that the individual might need support and help from. So it isn't just that they move and that's it. You know, that support and liaison between us and the social work team is very important and does continue. So that's enough for me. Like Nick, I'll be around for questions later, and I'll hand over to Angela Wardell now. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. I'm Angela Wardell. I'm a service manager at the London Borough of Merton, and I cover various aspects of independent living. So I oversee Merton Supported Living Service, Mascot Telecare, and also Gleelands, which is an extra care site, which is actually for people over 55 that need support in their home and may progress to need more support. And we do have some learning disability clients today. So my presentation today, though, is about supported living. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Oh, one back, sorry. Oh, no, that was right. Sorry, my mistake. Thank you. So we've actually been operational as a service since 2007. And we had, previous to that, been Hazelmere Avenue residential home. And a decision was made to step away from residential on that site and have that site redeveloped. And to do that, we had to move everyone, staff, clients, everyone, to D'Olive Close, which was then not extra care, but it was sheltered care for older people. So we actually shared the site with older people. I think, as Andy was saying, we do provide a service that's varied for various different needs. And I think, and other people that have heard me talk about this before, my biggest surprise after working with people for probably about 10 or 12 years at that stage, we made lots of assumptions about how we thought people would do and how well they'd cope in a situation moving from residential to supported living. And I think the biggest shock for me was how resilient people were and how they just bloomed, really. And people who I thought might struggle or who may not get on with that person and get on with that, people chose totally different friendship groups and their abilities just flourished almost overnight. It was a real shock. And I think we were all really taken aback by that because we thought we knew people who worked for a long time, and it was an amazing surprise for us. And yeah, very quickly people adapted. Things worked well. Not to say there weren't some issues along the way, of course there were, but overridingly, it was a very positive experience for a move.
No,
so, well,
it was not that.
Yeah, it said there that, well, not my name, but I think it was my name.
So then they decided D'Olive was, so basically a stock transfer happened, council stock, and that went over to an organisation who wanted to then redevelop D'Olive Close. So we moved to the Gables. We've moved around quite a bit. We moved to the Gables, and by that stage, as we moved to the Gables, Hazelmere was close to reopening. So we were looking at expanding the service. That expansion now is over 4 sites. So we've just taken Cliveden. It was always supported living, but it was managed by my colleague Anthea Chambers, who's based at Meadowsweet. So Cliveden has now come over to us as well. We also have had some people that were in our 24-hour services, but have actually moved more independent living, and we do outreach to those too. The three main sites, Doliff, Haslemere and the Gables, they have 24 hours staffing on site. So there is waking night, and Cliveden has mascot telecare in place for any emergencies. So they're able to press their button, that will go through to mascot, who will then contact a member of staff to respond. Thank you. Next slide, please. So a little bit about having your own flat, a bit like all of us really. We get to a certain age where we think, well, maybe living with parents is lovely, but perhaps we ought to have a bit more independence. Others of your children may have gone off to university first, they may have shared flats with other people, and that really should be no different just because someone has a learning disability. So we're looking at people having a tenancy at Doliff, at Haslemere, or a licence at the Gables. A licence is slightly more flexible than a tenancy. It doesn't have quite the same statutory rights. And that's in place really because the Gables is more of a transition service of people going to learn independence and then moving on. But basically for both, it means having your own front door key, having legal protection in your flat, and it also comes with responsibilities. So antisocial behaviour shouldn't be happening. You're responsible for your visitors. You have to pay your rent, your bills, and that's where staff come in. Because obviously, for someone with a learning disability, that's daunting for anyone when they get their first property or move into their first flat. But for someone with a learning disability, there's extra challenge. So that's very much part of the staff support to ensure that they're supporting with those issues to maintain their tenancy. Learning new daily living skills. So when we all moved out, we probably couldn't cook very well and weren't so good at managing our time. So it's all those very basic things that we all have to learn to do. And again, staff play a major part in that, in assessing the person, seeing where their strengths are. We always come from strengths-based and look at what people have and what they want to do and what their dreams are and their aspirations. We have those conversations, and then we look at very practical ways of delivering those. Everyone in our service has a support day, which is a full day with your worker. You might learn to cook, you might do some batch cooking, you might go out on a trip, you're shopping or cleaning. We really think it's important for the people living in supported living to be active members of their community. So we don't have cars that ferry people about places. We want the people to go on public transport, go to the shops, and use all those local facilities in the same way that all the rest of it. So having financial independence is a major part of anyone's independence. Really, without financial independence, true independence doesn't really exist. And we use a variety of options because we know this is often a concern for parents. How's the money going to be managed? So we've got a variety of options to ensure that that's done safe. That might mean someone having an account that's separate. So you can have cards that you put money on and the person has that card, but it's a limited amount of funds. Someone might have a savings account that they don't touch, but have their weekly money in an account that they do have access to. Some people are supported by staff, manage money. Other people are supported by the council to do that. And it's all a learning process. We don't just say, right, we've handed your money over to the council, that's it. It's all about people learning to budget, how to manage money, how to make choices about what they spend their money on, and just explain, even shopping, so making healthy choices. But we can't dictate to people, it's their money. And so we're there to advise and guide and provide information. That works most of the time. I'm not saying it always works. Sometimes people make bad choices, but we all make bad choices. And it's about someone's capacity and someone's learning. So there is a real support network in place. We use risk assessments to assess all those risks and build plans about how we manage that. In regards to the bigger finances, such as paying rent, that is done, but most people are eligible for housing benefits. So either we or the housing association or the social work team would help complete the forms for housing benefit. We find most of the time, because benefits increase because you're living independently, we find we're struggling to get people's money spent most of the time. The benefits do tend to cover the needs of the people living independently. That tends to work quite well. And Yes, so it's just about managing that going forward. The other thing to mention is that there is an expenditure when people first move in. So same as if you moved into your own flat, then it's not furnished. So people would need to buy furniture, equipment, cooking equipment. That is an expense. Most of the flats do have white goods, and so you've got fridges and cookers and things, but the general everything personally would need to be purchased. Thank you.
Next slide, Tahina.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So this is just a little bit about the various sites. So the one thing was also a surprise for us is how the sites have all evolved very differently, which isn't really a surprise because it's all got different people, and that just makes a whole environment feel very different. So if you went to the Gables, to Dolliff, to Hazelmere, find very different sites. We didn't plan that, it's just how it's evolved. So the Gables is the site that I said is transitional site. So people go, that would be the first place people came to when they went into autism generally. It's evolved, we work in partnership with Evolve, who are the housing association there. The flats there, they're nice flats, they've got a kitchenette and a bathroom. The site has a lot of communal space. So this is a good place for people to start, because I think there's lots of concerns at times about people being isolated and not being around people enough. But there's communal garden, there's a huge communal space there where people can do cooking. They do at Gables, actually, I think once or twice a week they all cook a meal together. We've got a sensory room, a TV lounge, shared laundry facility and a communal garden. And yes, as I said previously, it's a short-term licence. The purpose of it is for assessment and development of daily living skills in preparation for a move on. So next slide, please. So these are just some pictures of life at the Gables. You've got some pictures there of what one of the flats looks like, and just the various activities that people do in their lives. Next slide, please. So Hazelmere Avenue is the smallest of the sites, so that's only got 8 flats. This is in Wimbledon Park and it's owned by Wandle. It consists of 2 separate houses and there's four flats in each, but they're interconnectable via the office upstairs and downstairs. This opened in 2011. This has also communal properties. So the picture there is actually one of the lounges, and the flats themselves include a kitchenette, a fully accessible bathroom, and Hazelmere has amazing gardens. Both sides have got very, very large gardens. Nice. They also have a shared laundry. And as I say, and this room that you can see there, actually the other end of it has a kitchen. So again, we can prepare meals there and people can eat together if they so wish. Next slide, please. And here's some pictures of Hazelmere. So our Halloween party was legendary at Hazelmere for quite some years. And there's some pictures there of the flats as well, and another one of the rooms. Thank you. Next slide. So Dolliff Close is our largest site. That's 18 flats. That's on Bond Road. That's opposite Asda, for anyone that knows Mitcham well. This site development opened in 2015. And the flats are situated over 3 floors, as you can see in the picture. There's lift access to all floors. There's a communal garden space, but no internal shared facilities. So there's no communal space. We do share it with older people. So the other side is for older people. Well, not older really, only over 55. Yeah, so not old at all. But basically, they do have a communal room. It's been an issue for a number of years, but we are now able to use that communal room. So that's been lovely for parties and things like that. And so we are making use of that, which is really nice. Lovely space. There's a staff office block on site on the ground floor. So that as you come into the building, that's where the staff are situated. And the flats at Dolliff are amazing. They're large and they have full, so they've got a fully functioning bathroom, and they do all have either an exit out to on the ground floor to the garden, or they have a balcony and winter garden on the upper floor. And the tenancies at this site have a tenant. Next slide. And here's some pictures of living at Dolliff, and some of our lockdown pictures, actually, some of the activities that went on during lockdown. So next slide. Oh, and that's me. So I'll hand over to Rochelle for Shared Lives. Thanks for your time.
Hi, my internet is a little bit slow today, so just to let you know if I kind of cut in and out. I'm the manager of the Merton Shared Lives scheme. Shared Lives is a supported housing scheme in the community. We have 50 bed spaces at the moment, and it's centred on being in a carer's home. So people that have health and social care experience will open up their homes if they have spare bedrooms and support service users from their home so they can feel part of a family. And but we also have accommodation where carers own a second home and they provide floating support. So it'll be for those that are a little bit more independent. The accommodation is for those who are 18 and over. We have no age limit, and it's for those with mental health, learning disabilities, physical disabilities, sensory impairment. The main importance of Shared Lives is just finding a match to a property. So if we have those with physical disabilities, as long as we can find something that has ground floor and is adapted accordingly, then that would be a good match for them. And also with the carer, so their expertise in and a history. Individuals have a chance to view multiple carers if we have vacancies, and carers are also able to review multiple referrals. They do have to come through social workers, as Nick said at the beginning of the presentation, and then we would go through the matching process. Next slide. So who are Shared Lives carers? So as I said, although it's in a family home, we use that word quite loosely. It could be one individual, it could be a single carer who doesn't have any other family living in the home with them, it could be a couple, it could be a couple with children, or it could be a carer on their own who has grandchildren to visit or doesn't have anyone to visit. So again, it's really about finding a match to that carer. Carers are self-employed, and they're recruited through the London Borough of Merton's Shared Lives Assessment Panel. It's quite similar to foster care assessment, where we spend 4 to 6 months getting to know the carer, visiting them on multiple occasions, checking their accommodation, etc., and ensuring that that we could trust that they can be a good carer kind of when we leave their property after we've placed somebody there. They're trained and assessed by us consistently, so they have annual training, and we also have forums where people from specialised areas will come and speak to carers and just give them some insight into different needs. Next slide, please. So Shared Lives, what can be expected is it's shared facility, so it's a room in a shared house essentially, and whether you live with a carer or not with a carer, so whether it's on site or off site, we'll have your own bedroom and your own set of front door keys to your bedroom and to the house, but it's shared facilities in terms of bathroom, kitchen and living room. Also, it's a license agreement within Shared Lives, and you have an allocated Shared Lives officer who will do reviews with you, benefits, make sure that you're applying for everything that you're entitled to, making sure that you've got a support plan in place, risk assessment, a hospital passport, everything that's needed to enable you to live an independent, as independently as possible in Shared Lives. Next slide, please. So again, as we said before, it's Shared Lives is to try and enable as much independence as possible. Where we can, we would encourage an individual to do something themselves. Obviously, where they need support, then our carers would support with that. The support plan would definitely specify what is needed with help and what's not. It's not a restricted accommodation, so they can come and go as you please. Allowed visitors, not overnight, but visitors to come and see your bedroom and use the community facilities as well. We do encourage individuals to be part of the local community. We do organise trips ourselves as well. We have Christmas parties. We did a Brighton trip recently, and so you would be invited to all of those. Next slide, please. So carers are there to, as I said, essentially help you look after yourself. So for different individuals, that will mean different things. Some it's to do with their mental health, and it will just be more of emotional support. Some it will be remembering appointments, remembering to take medication, help with food preparation, personal care, trips to fill appointments or to see family members, encouragement to get out and go and do activities if you are part of one. But again, the person-centred support plan would really dictate what the carer is responsible for doing and what they're not. Next slide, please. So leading on from that, also managing money, completing forms and understanding letters. Most of our carers would not be too involved with managing money, in the sense that they wouldn't take over full responsibility. If you felt you were unable to do so, then we work closely with client financial affairs, but they can help to budget and teach you budgeting skills. Next slide, please. I think I've touched on all of that. So next slide as well, please. So shared lives, as I said before, is referral via a social worker. If the social worker feels that shared lives is right for you, they'll make a referral to us, and we'll look through that and find if and advise if we think that those needs can be met within our scheme. If they are and we find a match, then the process of viewing the different properties will begin. Some of our service users, one viewing is not enough, so that they do then separately go and meet the carer for a cup of tea, or they might spend one night there to determine if that's the right placement for them. And as I said before, there is a 28-day review. So even if you find that you do like a property and you move in and within the first 28 days for some reason it's not working, then that review is there to discuss any issues or concerns. Next slide, please. As I've spoken about the matches a lot so far, so yeah, it will be based on care and support needs, medical needs, and cultural needs as well, if possible, and who else is already in the accommodation as well. So we want to make sure that where possible you can get on with the other service users if there's any there. Some carers have up to 3 service users and some only have 1, so it's again dependent on individual properties. Next slide, please. And that's the end of my presentation. So if there's any questions as well, please let me know.